Week 3 is here, and so are we. Welcome back to episode 3 of the DFS Dudes, your DFS podcast to get all your daily fantasy advice, whatever you want, just to chill with us. We are your hosts, Sam Corcoran, Jake Hart, Julian Sherman down below. Fellas, how are we doing? How did we do this week?
I did pretty well. My cash hit, which was pretty nice, but my tournaments only did like min cash because I did have the Jared Goff and Monra stack, but basically I had Saquon in all my lineups and he kind of fucked me, which sucks. And Daryl Henderson didn't do that well, but I think overall I made a profit, which was nice. So had a pretty good week.
Yeah, I mean my basically every lineup had a Tua Tyreek stack, or it had a Flacco or Garrett Wilson stack. So I honestly,
I don't think anyone was expecting the. I was gonna say I don't think anyone was expecting the Flacco Garrett Wilson stack to work.
I mean, it was like just a big get off play. Each of them were less than 1% owned, and they were super cheap, and it allowed me to get to guys like I was just telling you guys. I had a lineup that had Chubb and Tyreek and Mark Andrews, and it allowed a lot of flexibility because I even had Debo in that lineup too, which if he had done a little better for me, that lineup would have gone from good to great. But obviously, like you heard my favorite lineup last week had Tua and Tyreek, and it was a big game stack with Andrews. So obviously that game was nuts if anyone watched it. So that played out in our favor.
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed. I didn't get to watch the early window. I was at a T-Pain concert plus Young Gravy and other people. So hey, they came to Syracuse.
T-Pain concert
in the morning.
In the morning?
No, it's after. It's a 1 p.m. game. It's like 1 p.m. game starts. So it's like a afternoon concert, whatever. Anyways, for DFS, I won. I bet 3. I did the $1.5 million challenge. Bet 3, won 5. I had Goff, Williams, Javonte Williams, Najee Harris, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Debo, Christian Kirk, Alberto, and Brandon Cooks didn't really do much. So Bengals defense didn't really do much. It was really just like the Goff Amon-Ra stack really worked out for me. Christian Kirk as well called that. So that was nice, but I'll get in the plus a little bit, trying to make my way up. I lost all my money week 1. So hopefully week two was better, and hopefully week 3 can be even better than that.
All right. Yeah, I mean, getting into it, just like looking at, and obviously our consensus, if you check out our brand new Instagram account that I created last week, the DFS Dudes on Instagram, I posted our consensus lineup. We did cash in the Millie Maker, 2 times money. We had Dotson, Andrews, Tua, and Tyreek. So that was really solid. We had a couple big duds, which really hurt us, but we still were solidly placed. And then looking at this slate, it's by far the toughest in my opinion. The big games aren't as obvious, and quarterback and wide receivers are priced up really high with just not as many like beginning of the year sleepers, if you know what I'm saying. Like people have kind of established themselves on offenses, and there's not going to be as many sub 5,000, 20-30% owned guys. So it'll be interesting to see how you guys have gotten away from that, because I definitely have a strategy that I like this week.
Yeah, I think, well, the first 2 weeks are probably my favorite 2 weeks, because the first week everyone thinks, oh, I know what's going to happen, right? Oh, this got to happen. He's going to hit. And then someone hits that, is probably a one-off, and they overreact to it, right? They're like, oh, he got a 40% target share as a slot wide receiver. He's going to have it again. And they overreact. And then, you can get leverage off of that in week 2. But once it's week 3, then you go to week 4, and the people kind of know what's happening, getting to the point where it's like, all right, couple weeks, and we kind of can see the Vegas lines add up a little bit more accurately. And I think, to Jake's point, the pricing gets a little stiffer because people know what they understand. Like, there's no Michael Pittman who is priced in the mid 5s in week 1 because they came out the pricing 3 months before week 1. So it's like there's really not that much of that.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to talk about. Week 3 getting a bit more interesting. Let's just jump right into it. starting with the quarterbacks, and we talked about Jake and I talked about this a little bit pre-show. Julian chimed in for a little bit. But guys, the quarterbacks are very expensive this week. There's not many cheap options. And I mean, looking at it, I see only two in mind. Two in mind that I would really consider on the cheaper side. Going high this week is a bit risky in my opinion, considering some of the defenses. If you want to go high, Jalen Hurts, you could stack him with AJ Brown. That would be an extremely expensive stack. But I'm going to point out two guys. Tom Brady at 6K versus Green Bay. Offense. I mean, Jake, you don't like that. I'll let you talk about that. Actually, I'll let you take that away.
I have no idea. I mean, you're talking about no Mike Evans, first of all. And then Chris Godwin, maybe he plays.
I don't think
maybe Julio plays, but they're both coming off injuries either way. Yeah. So, like, potentially his receiver core is Scotty Miller, Russell Gage, and Brashad Perryman, which, again, if you have a lot of faith in one of those guys, maybe you take your shot and you go, okay, Brady is going to throw 2 touchdowns and 8 catches to Scotty Miller. And then obviously, like, that would be a great get off. So I'll be interested if he is in your main lineup, which one of those guys you're really excited about.
Yeah, but the thing is, when I look at Brady, I mean, if you look at his price point, he's 6K. You go down one, it's Derek Carr, and then Jared Goff, and up 100's Tua, and those guys just seem like much better plays.
Well, and it's really
Brady. I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to. If he was fully healthy at 6K, or everyone was fully healthy, he had Julio, he had Mike Evans, he had Chris Godwin. Okay, that's a great play, but who is he going to throw the ball to? You know what I mean?
The game script is also just not as exciting to me. Watching these teams play in the first few weeks, it has been ground and pound. And I have Fournette as one of the guys that I'm really excited to play this week, just because
say him later on.
And so, I mean, yeah, maybe it's an interesting get off if you think, oh, Fournette gets maybe like 6 or 7 catches and a couple receiving touchdowns. That would be interesting to me just because no one's going to be playing Brady Fournette. But again, like, that's getting really out there for me, where like you're getting into the Flacco Garrett Wilson range last week where, yeah, if it hits, it's going to be exciting. But the odds are just not, in my opinion, in favor of that.
Fair enough. I was going to talk about Carr for a little bit. I think going up against Tennessee, Tennessee's defense has really struggled so far. You lose to the Giants, you get annihilated by the Bills. I think Derek Carr can have a very good week going against Tennessee. If I can find where I was located, there we are. Yeah, I think the Raiders' offense can do a lot. Tennessee's offense has been somewhat slow, but I think they can start to get it going. I think the Raiders' defense is a team that they can maybe get it going a little bit more with Derrick Henry, who's really struggled to start the season off. Treylon Burks could have something. He had a solid week last week. They could do with that. The other guy I wanted to talk about, and this isn't much of a shootout because I feel like the shootout games are really high priced for the quarterbacks, and I'm not willing to pay that necessarily. But Justin Fields going up against Houston, I think could make a little bit of noise. And he's a guy that you probably wouldn't stack. You would really just go for him if you need just a cheap quarterback to fill in your roster. I think if you want to go stack, you probably go Derek Carr or Tom Brady. But Tom Brady, you got to pick one of those receivers. I agree with you, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, talking about quarterbacks, I had Hurts like you, and then I have a couple other names that I'm actually kind of excited about. If you want to spend up, I like Kyler Murray this week. I think he's shown where even when the offense, because the offense has just, even against the Raiders at the end of last week, the Raiders lost that game. The Cardinals did not win it, and their offense looked bad. And he still put up, 25 points on DraftKings, 28 points, and he had a solid performance week 1 in a shit show of a game against the Chiefs. So I think what is a Rams defense that has not looked like the typical Rams defense that we were expecting. I mean, they gave up a lot to the Mariota-led Falcons last week. So I could get excited about him, especially with his stack options being so cheap. And if James Conner's out, you could see them rely a little bit more on the passing game. and just like that game could get going, as we've seen it divisional rivalries in the past. You don't really know what to expect, but with a guy like Kyler Murray, I think he's got a solid enough floor of like 20 points that I can price myself up for that upside. And then again, like there's a couple lower guys I like Mariota and Lawrence. If you like the game script and potentially like a stack option, like if you really believe in Kyle Pitts bouncing back, Mariota is a guy who could sneakily get 25 points. And that would be really cheap and allow you to get up on some of those other wide receivers that are priced so high this week. Like if you want a Cooper Kupp or Justin Jefferson that are 9,000 plus, which is really tough. And I just can't get myself to do that when I have a 7,000 quarterback. I like that. But what are you thinking, Julian?
Yeah, so I actually like the Justin Fields pick by Sam because I think, and I also like the Mariota. The two guys that I'm targeting really that are cheap are Marcus Mariota and Justin Fields, because I think, first of all, they both have good matchups and they both have really solid floors. And I'm with you. I don't really want to pay up for a quarterback this week. I mean, if I am going to, obviously, I mean, Josh Allen's a stud, Lamar Jackson's a stud, but they're pretty darn expensive. And if I'm looking down, I mean, the highest I think I'm going to go, if I'm being completely honest, is Matthew Stafford at 6.5, because everyone above that just seems really expensive to me when I can get a Stafford going against Arizona, which I think is going to be a really good game to target. I think it's going to be high scoring. There are a lot of players you compare him with, and I think the problem with getting Stafford is if you get Stafford, you kind of have to get Kupp. And if you get Kupp, I mean, he's really expensive. I mean, it's really hard when you have like a 9.9K wide receiver, right, to stack with your quarterback, which you kind of have to do. I mean, unless you want to go Higbee, Allen Robinson, but probably not going to do that. And so for me, that's the highest price I'm going to go up. And then it's Carr. I like Carr, Mariota, and Justin Fields. Those are the other three guys that I think, because Fields and Mariota have had such a high floor that you can run them naked. But I think Derek Carr also, with the weapons that he has, I think Devontae Adams going to have a bounce back week. Darren Waller's fine. Hunter Renfrow is out, I'm pretty sure, but I'm fine with going Carr. And so those are really my three main quarterbacks I'm targeting.
Mm-hmm. I liked a lot of those quarterbacks. Like I like Stafford and I like Carr, and I have Kirk Cousins even written down just because I think that is going to be a game where a lot of points are going to be scored. It's just like, I mean, like you said, like, I mean, you're paying somewhat a reasonable price at quarterback, but then you're paying like the stack price is like 15,000, 16,000. And that is just, it's really hard to build a lineup around that I'm like comfortable with. And it's so funny. This is the first week where like I'm picking players, and it took me like a solid hour of just like running through my lineup and changing things until I found something I was comfortable with, because I just kept running out of money like over and over again. And so I'll be interested to hear what you guys have at wide receiver and running back to get away from some of the potential. Cause I mean, those big game stacks are going to be heavily, heavily owned. Like I guarantee Josh Allen, Tua, like all the guys, Carson Wentz, all these guys are going to have 15% ownership. And so it'll be interesting to see if the Millie Maker winner is a guy like Mariota or Fields.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go into running back, because it's really interesting this week. There's not many low profile guys to talk about too much. Jake, you mentioned Leonard Fournette. I completely agree with you on that, and I want you to talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Fournette. If Brady is out of options passing, he's very willing to pass to Fournette. They have shown that they are very willing to hand the ball to him 20 plus times, and he is the only guy. And you saw David Montgomery run through the Packers defense when all the Bears were doing was running. Justin Fields passed the ball 11 times, and David Montgomery was still able to run for over 100 yards on that Packers defense. So I think that they are susceptible to the run, and if he stacks on 5 catches and he has no touchdowns, so you get a little bit of touchdown upside, or maybe regression to the mean, more like that. I think he could have a really solid week, and he's pretty reasonably priced in my opinion at 6.5. You're not paying 8.5, 9 that you're having to get with a guy like Taylor, where I think this week they're in a pretty similar situation in terms of would I play one or over the other, which it doesn't happen very often, but I think that's how you know that it's a good value.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the Leonard Fournette, I think he's going to be the highest owned running back on the slate, because going against the Green Bay Packers run defense, which has been bad, I mean, for like 2-3 years, the way they run their defense. I mean, I think back to, like, I'm a Niner fan, so I think back to Raheem Mostert putting up 220 yards on him. And it's tough for me to see a way where Fournette doesn't hit value because he's at 6.5K. And that's just value considering the matchup, the workload he's going to get. His touchdown, he hasn't had a touchdown yet. I think he's due for a touchdown. Obviously, that's probably a gambler's fallacy a little bit, but I do think that he has high touchdown equity with getting, what did he get, like 24 carries last week or something crazy like that. And so I think Leonard Fournette probably is going to be the highest on running back on the slate. So
Leonard Fournette had – oh, sorry, you weren't done talking.
No. Keep on going. There's nothing.
I was going to say Leonard Fournette did have 24 carries. And yeah, I think this Packers run defense has not shown that they can stop running backs like Leonard Fournette. He's going to be used more in the passing game. And I think Leonard Fournette is probably your best play this week. He's going to be high owned. I'm fine with that. I think this week I'm not really looking at high owned guys. I really just need to save money where I can and get the best value, because overall there's not that many guys that are at high value that scream to me, I need this person on my team. As for another running back, there's not many low profile guys, but if James Conner is hurt, I have a question for you guys. Would you go Eno Benjamin at 4,700 or Darrell Williams at 5,100 if James Conner is hurt? Because I think one of those guys would be a good play.
Neither, honestly.
Neither.
Kyler Murray runs the ball in so much, and you don't know which one. Like, Darrell Williams looked great against the Raiders, but they had the same amount of touches. Like, it's just that it's too much of a mystery to me. And it's in the same way that, like, I would love a single Seattle running back this week. It's just that's not the reality. And so I just don't feel comfortable picking one where, especially not guys that I'm like confident enough in their talent, I guess is what I'll say, because I do have a guy that's low priced in Cam Akers at 5.5. I mean, against a really bad Cardinals defense, I think he could if he hops in for a touchdown or two, I think he's still going to be really low owned because people are, they've got a recent memory of him having absolute fantasy dud weeks, but he had like 14, 15 carries last week.
He had more carries than Darrell Henderson.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think he's a guy at 5.5. And then low, Miles Sanders, awful Commanders defense. And if the Eagles get up early, they've shown that they're willing to give the ball to him. And as long as he can stay on the field in the red zone, which no guarantees, because we've seen Hurts take it in himself. We've seen Gainwell get one. Week one, Hurts, Gainwell, Sanders, and Boston Scott all had rushing touchdowns, which was incredibly frustrating to watch. But he's still at 5.5K, pretty reasonably priced for a decent upside.
And he'll be low owned in my opinion, because I think people, or actually I don't know, will he be low owned? That's an interesting question, because I think people see, Washington defense, Miles Sanders is the RB1 in Philadelphia, even though it's a committee there. It's a full-on committee. So it's hard to tell if he's going to be high owned or low owned. I don't know if people are going to factor in the committee. I don't know if people are just going to be like Miles Sanders RB1. I think Cam Akers can hit a bit more, especially if you're doing a milli maker. You want a guy a bit more low owned. I think Cam Akers will be that guy, because I think people are going to be looking more at Darrell Henderson, the higher price guy, because higher prices usually show that, this guy's going to do better than that guy. So I like the Cam Akers pick a lot, Jake.
Yeah, I think the thing with Cam Akers is we still really don't know. And I think for tournaments, that actually can be an advantage, because people are going to be like, I just don't know about Cam Akers. Who knows, right? But it's trending towards Cam Akers as the lead back. I mean, I think the reason they didn't go with him is they wanted to see a little more from him. But I do think they have faith that Cam Akers is the guy. And so in cash games, you can't really go Cam Akers because cash, you really want certainty with high floor. But Cam Akers in a good offense does have good upside. And who knows, maybe it goes to 80-20 Cam Akers now. Right, because that's the way it's trending. I mean, it's 1 week, but that could easily happen. And so I think Cam Akers at his price, for tournaments, is something that's definitely doable, especially if Stafford is pretty chalky and, Stafford busts. Cam Akers get in the end zone a couple of times. That's a solid play right there.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I kept running through lineups, and I found myself just so much more comfortable, especially at running back this week, with eating the chalk and getting really different in other places. I love David Montgomery. I know he's going to be high owned. I love David Montgomery. I love Fournette. And the guy that I just was willing to spend up on was Derrick Henry. I mean, he's just such a difference maker. And when he has that week, I want to have him in my lineup. When he finally breaks through and has that random 40-point week at the running back that, I mean, he and so few other guys have the actual potential to have. I want him there because I've had so many years where, I mean, you basically don't have a chance of cashing if you don't have him. And so I think this week against the Raiders, he has a really good shot of getting those 2-3 touchdown games. And I'm willing to take my shot on that because I think does have somewhat of a floor higher than he had in the first 2 weeks against, I mean, the Raiders defense is just, as much as I want it to be good as a ride or die Raiders fan, it's just not. And so I watched Kyler Murray run around for 20 seconds on a 2-point conversion play. I think Derrick Henry's going to have a good day.
Oh yeah, that was a rough Raider game. But for a Raider fan, I think for me, the running backs that I'm going with is, I think Dalvin Cook at 7.9, because people are going to see last game and they're going to be like, what did he have, like 8 carries, didn't have many yards. Well, he got really game scripted out. Like, you want to talk about game scripted out, that was Dalvin Cook. And I think for him, they just passed the ball the entire time, and Kirk Cousins is ass anyway. So, I mean, he threw a pick like 3 times in the red zone. And so I think for me, he's going to go under-owned, I think. And I think there are a lot of other better plays, probably, like if we're talking cash, like Leonard Fournette would be a better play in cash. But the upside that Dalvin Cook brings with the low ownership at sub 8K, that's something that I could go with. And I don't know, what do you guys think of the Dalvin Cook? You guys think he's a good tournament play? Or
I wrote him down on my list of favorites, and then I switched it to Mixon just because when watching the Vikings play, I just don't have enough faith right now that it's gonna be Dalvin Cook because Alexander Mattison is getting so many snaps. And if I'm gonna pay 7.9 for a guy, I want to be confident that it's him who's running the ball into the end zone. And so it makes me a little uneasy, but there is a lot of upside there.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, Joe Mixon was a guy that he's one of the best plays.
He's going to be so high owned.
He's going to be really high owned going against the Jets. I mean, he's going to be.
You saw Nick Chubb last week, and it's just.
Yeah, it's Mixon's the better play. If you want to go purely who's the better play most of the time, it's going to be Mixon. But everyone's going to think that, and so everyone's going to play Mixon. So what happens? Mixon flops. Dalvin Cook gets in the end zone a couple times. Then that's really how you do well in a GPP, right? And so the other player that I'm going to go with is Josh Jacobs. And I've said this, I think, every single time, and it's pretty terrible every single time. But that's the thing with a player like Josh Jacobs, is that nobody wants to have Josh Jacobs on their roster, right? But he's at 5.4K, and I think he's in a spot. I mean, obviously there are some questions about Josh Jacobs, but you look at where he's priced. I mean, he's at the same price as Jamal Williams, which I think people are just going to – the recency bias on Josh Jacobs is going to be crazy. I don't know. He's not going to get 100% of the carries, but he'd probably get a 70%, 75%, get a few targets. At 5.4K, that's someone that I really want. He's going to be – I'm pretty sure he's going to be pretty low owned because they're going to look at his game log and they're going to be like, oh, that's disgusting, Josh Jacobs. They're just going to run a slant at the 1-yard line with Devontae Adams again, which could happen easily.
Or a fade with Waller.
Or a fade, right?
Exactly.
And that's the thing. And I think he gets in the end zone a couple times at 5.4K, which is he could easily do. And I think he's going to – at one point he's going to have one of those Josh Jacobs 100-yard, 2-touchdown games with 3 – like – and then it's just going to – I want to be on Jacobs when that happens. And so the problem is, if I'm on Jacobs a lot until that happens, there's a good chance he's going to bust. But once he does hit, I think that's someone that I want to have on my roster. And so really Josh Jacobs, I think, is a guy that besides the chalk of Joe Mixon, Leonard Fournette, those are just amazing plays in general. I think Josh Jacobs is the guy that I'm going to go against the field with because I think Carr is going to be high owned. Devontae Adams will probably be pretty high owned. That whole passing attack will be. So Josh Jacobs, write it in.
I was going to say, speaking to Devontae Adams, I think it's a perfect segue to go to receivers. So I'm stacking Carr, Devontae Adams. I also have Darren Waller as my tight end. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I found a few cheap receivers, and I'm curious. I found 2 guys who I think are cheap, and I think you can get a lot of value out of them. First guy, going back to the Cardinals Rams game, Jake, you had him on your roster last week. Greg Dortch. I think he's looked pretty good. 4,300. If you need a cheap guy, go after him. I need that. I have 2 guys sub 4,500, so I'm gonna need that help. The other guy I have even cheaper. This season so far, he got 5 targets week 1, 6 targets week 2. Scored a touchdown last game, the game-winning touchdown for the New England Patriots, Nelson Agholor. Going against a Baltimore team whose secondary has not looked that great this year. New England's going to be playing from behind. I think Nelson Agholor is a very solid play, and that's a guy that I think New England will target a lot going up against this Baltimore secondary, which has struggled at times. Obviously, you saw it last week against the Dolphins. And yeah, I think those are 2 cheap plays. The other guy I'm going with, at the end of the day, my flex was a bit. I had 7,200 left, and the one guy I found, again, going against a secondary, not the greatest secondary, but Amon-Ra St. Brown at 7,200, whose price has skyrocketed this entire season so far. So I might as well just spend the money on him.
I think if you're gonna go with Agholor is kind of a weird pick. Because, you go up from 4.1 to 5K, really isn't that massive of a jump.
I don't have that money, though.
Kobe Myers, who had 13 targets last week. And so I think if you are going to go with a wide receiver for New England, Nelson Agholor, I just kind of disgusting to play him. You can, but if I'm going with a New England wide receiver, I think I got to go Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, but then I realized that I just don't want anyone on New England, just at all.
I don't blame you. I never thought I would want that, but I think that's a good price for Agholor at 4,100.
I am fading the wide receiver position hard. I think people are going to have really high owned Kupp, Jefferson, Adams, Chase, Diggs, Hill, Amon-Ra, Jalen Waddle. I think you're talking about having potentially 10 guys that are all like 15% owned. And you don't see that in many weeks. And so I don't want any of them. I think in each individual one, there's too many flaws, whether it be just way too overpriced, game script, or just simply the fact, you talk about a guy like Stephon Diggs, who is going to probably be 20% owned after he has lit defenses on fire, and he's priced somewhat reasonably because his price came out before the Monday night game. But last year, he went up against Xavier Howard twice and didn't get over 15 points in either of those games, and he put up a touchdown in both of them. So it makes me a little I don't really want him. And I have ways to get off of that. And a lot of it is other receivers in those games where I think points will be scored. The first one, Allen Robinson, 5.7K. He had a touchdown last week. And if it wasn't for some BS, like eye in the sky injury call in the middle of a play, he would have had 2 touchdowns. I don't know if you guys saw that.
I did not
It made
see
no
that.
sense. It was basically ball gets snapped. He's wide open in the end zone, catches it, and then they blow the whistle and say, no, the like guy in the booth. Like the defense was playing. There was no stoppage. Everyone on the field played the play out, and the whistle blew after the ball was in the end zone. It was ridiculous. But I think they're going to make a concerted effort to get him the ball. And in a game where you could see this Rams offense put up high 30s in points, as you've seen the Cardinals offense. I mean, the Raiders put up 20 in the first half and then went and died, but you saw that they can put up points in a hurry against this defense. Chiefs put up 44 in the first game. I think Allen Robinson has a good shot at 5.7K to get like 2 touchdowns because he is such a red zone threat that it seems very worth it to me. And then 2 other guys, if you're going down, Isaiah McKenzie and Chris Olave. Isaiah McKenzie was a big sleeper in fantasy, especially redraft at the start of the year. And now people are kind of fading him because I think he's only had like 3 targets in each of the games. But Gabe Davis is a little banged up. I already read off the Stephon Diggs stat. Dawson Knox doesn't seem to be much of a factor in this offense. So I think I want to be there for that Isaiah McKenzie game where it seems like he's had it in the last few years where he gets randomly 10 catches and 2 touchdowns. Like, I mean, it keeps happening. And that is the kind of week at 4.7 where you are going in the top 1%. And then the second one, Chris Olave, 4.5K. He had, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he had some insane amount of air yards last week. I think it was like 250 air yards. And he had 12 targets. It's just, it seems like they want to get him the ball. And when it comes through, he's going to hit big. And that's all I want in my 4K wide receivers. I want a guy who, if they hit, my lineup is going to look great.
Yeah, I think so. The fading the high price wide receivers, I think definitely that's a thing that you can do because I do think there's some value there. The one player that I think you talk about Stephon Diggs at 7.7. That's someone that I think is just underpriced for what he is, and so it's hard for me. If there is a high price wide receiver, I'm going to go Diggs. Now I don't want to. I'm not going to spend 9.9K on Cooper Kupp because if he gets 24, 25 fantasy points, that's like okay. Like for him to really hit value and to win it, he's got to put ceiling game 45, 50 points. Like that's something. Okay, now I'm burnt by Cooper Kupp. If he gets up 22, 23 points, I'm not burnt. When it's a 9.9K wide receiver, that's okay. And so for me, I think I am going to go that Diggs play is pretty great. And Chase, the thing at 8,100, Joe Mixon's going to be really chalky. So not many people are going to have Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. And so that's something that you can do to create leverage off the Joe Mixon, but still 8,100 for Jamar Chase. The upside is there, but I just don't really like it that much. And so I'm with you with the saving money at wide receiver. You can pay up for Travis Kelce, pay up for a good running back, something like that. So I'm with you with that. And the wide receiver that I think there's one wide receiver that I'm really liking is Brandon Cooks at 5.8K because I think he's still underpriced. I think Houston is not a great team. Okay, I'm not disputing that, but he's a wide receiver 1. And a wide receiver 1 at 5.8K, I think is a really solid value. And I mean, there aren't many wide receiver 1s down there. I mean, you look at it, you got Brandon Cooks at 5.8, and above it, I mean, Allen Lazard is priced higher than him. T. Higgins, Marquise Brown. I mean, those guys, they are great. Adam Thielen's priced higher. And I think with Brandon Cooks, it's a very underrated aspect. I think he's going to go underrated. He goes underrated every single year, whether it's redraft or DFS. And that's a guy that I'm really thinking that, okay, that's I'm going to target. And if I'm paying up, I am going to have to go Stephon Diggs. And I think Juju Smith-Schuster as well at 5.5K. We still don't know much about that offense. They're spreading the ball around a lot. And if you're going to go Patrick Mahomes, which you can, Juju Smith-Schuster at 5.5K to pair him with. I think that's really solid.
Stack right there.
And yeah, for sure. And they're at 28 projected total, which is one of the highest on the slate. I think top 3. Yeah, it's like the 3rd highest on the slate. And he said he's going to spread it around the entire time. Kelsey's going to get his. I think he had 5 receptions last week, so who really knows? So the uncertainty that will play into the Juju Smith-Schuster area, the KC area, I'd like to get some of that and get Juju Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, and again, there are definitely flaws to this way of thinking, but the way I think about my lineup and a lot of the players and upside and how that factors in, just a like ideological standpoint, is, let's say you need to score like 250 points to put yourself to give yourself a shot, especially because if we're creating Millie Maker lineups with this, that's probably, I know this week was crazy and the winner had something like 285, but I always think of 250 points. So that means per $1,000 you spend, you need to get 5 points. So like for Cooper Kupp to return value, or for like these crazy high guys, they literally need to put up like 60 points.
Yeah.
And that's just like him having a solid week of what he's had. You're probably not winning with him in your lineup. And it's just because it throws you off every other league winning Jalen Waddle from last week and like Tyreek Hill and all these plays that can actually get you your 5 times on your money. And that is where I do agree with you. Stephon Diggs, I talked about it, but like he's definitely underpriced because he put up damn near 50 points on Monday night, and the prices had already come out where I think he would be in the 9,000s. That game really scares me because I think everyone is going to be super high owned. Both offenses are coming off crazy weeks. Everyone is super high priced, and the defenses are good. Maybe the Dolphins isn't as good, but the Bills defense is really good. And I feel like we underplay how much that actually affects the game and the game script. But again, I have no problem with playing Diggs. It didn't fit in my lineups, and that's kind of goes that way sometimes. And I wish I had the Stones last week to play some of the receivers that I just thought didn't fit, like having the Waddle and Tyreek.
We talked about that, how disappointed we were that we missed out on that stack. I remember you texting me about that and everything. But
if we had just gone that whole game stack, can you even imagine like adding Rashad?
We would have won.
Evan Duvernay. Like you could have played anyone except Chase Edmonds, of course.
Exactly. The one guy we want to play doesn't get anything. But anyways, yeah, I think we definitely have somewhat similar approaches. I would say Jake, it's Julian's in the middle of us. I would say Jake, where he wants to go one big guy and then fade a little bit. I'm definitely more get two. I have 2 guys, 2 big guys, 2 very low guys. So, and then you're just like fade all of them. So I'm kind of curious to see what strategy we go with in the consensus lineup. And I'm also kind of curious to see what we do for how much we win in our personal lineups. But with that in mind, let's move on to tight end. I already said I'll go first because I already said who it is. I'm stacking Raiders this week. So I already said Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Darren Waller. Now, I'm going to say right now, this could change, and I'll tell you why later on. Not now, but we'll save that for a little bit. But you have we've been doing something every week where we've been going very high at tight end. It has paid off every time. We went Andrews week 1 or Kelsey week 1, and then we did the other week
Kelsey
2.
week 1, Andrews week 2.
And it's paid off every time. So I'm fading those this week. I think you can get Waller at $1,000 less than Andrews, and I think he can do just as well, especially going up against the Tennessee defense that has struggled. But yeah, I also think another guy a bit more low end, Tyler Higbee, has been getting targeted so much by the Rams. He's been a pivotal part to their offense at 4,500 going against the Cardinals. We talked about that game a lot. I don't need to talk more about that game, but I think Higbee for a middle of the pack price is very solid for 4,500. The other low end guy I want to talk about, who's starting to get a little bit of targets on his team. He had 8 last game for week 1. Evan Engram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, going up against the Chargers team that you're going to be playing from behind. Again, they're targeting guys. They're going to be having to throw the ball a lot. I think Evan Engram could be a solid pick. I lean more on the high end tight ends. I have some space for that, so why not do it? So I'm going Waller, but those are some guys. You got a middle of the pack guy, you got a low end guy.
All right. Jake, you want to talk about
it? I'm going against what we've done. I think I mean, I feel like last 2 weeks, to me, just looking at the slate, it's been so obvious that there's one guy. Like Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce, I'm like, that is the guy. At this price, like, he's a shoo-in to be the best value. And I just don't feel that way this week with the matchups. Andrews against New England. I don't trust that New England defense. And the game script in KC, Indianapolis is a mystery to me. Like, honestly, both those offenses are so weird. And in terms of being good and bad on polar opposites. So I'm the highest I've seen at all is Kyle Pitts at 4,800, just because I think he is, so many people are going to do the wait and see, that I think you could see Kyle Pitts dip below like the 5% ownership, which definitely has not been the case in a while for Kyle Pitts. And he still does have that upside of being the most athletic tight end in the league and such a dynamic player that could get 10 catches. And you can say that about so few tight ends. But more than anything, I found myself, and this is actually an interesting strategy that I tried out last week and it worked pretty well. So we'll see for this week, is going double tight end in tight end and flex, because you can get guys who can get a 10-point floor with potential 20-point upside at such cheap. This week, I've been doing a lot with Logan Thomas at 3.5, who I really like. I think how is he still priced at 3.5? He's on the field constantly on a team that's scoring a ton of points, and he can get 8 targets week 1 and 5 or 6 week 2, and a lot of them are end zone targets. And he's only cashed in once. So I really like that. And I think he does have a solid 7 or 8 point floor. But what you're looking for is the upside that he brings with being such a big, strong, athletic tight end. And then the other one going even lower, 3.1, Irv Smith. He got priced before his game this week, which is big. He had, I think, 5 catches, a touchdown, 8 targets. I think at dirt cheap 3.1, what he brings in a game against the horrible Lions defense, that gets me really excited. And you get 2 guys who provide pretty good value and potential upside at only 6.6 combined. And then it gives me freedom for the rest of my lineup where everyone is priced up so high. If I want like a potential Cousins and Jay Jettis or Hurts and AJ Brown or some big stack like that people are getting. So maybe even Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, if you're so inclined. That's really the only way I can see you getting there.
Yeah. I think there's one player that I'm surprised you guys haven't talked about. And for me, it's kind of a screaming value at TJ Hawkinson at 4.2K. And I think people like TJ Hawkinson has played pretty darn terribly this year. And I know that, it's kind of gross, but Amon-Ra has been getting all the targets. He's the number 1 there. I'm not disputing that. But at 4.2 for a guy who's at a tight end spot where there's just, it's a gross place to have to put in your lineup, because there's really not that much if you don't want to pay up. And you're kind of, a lot of time it's taking a shot in the dark, like, hopefully gets in the end zone or targets a few times. But for TJ Hawkinson, I mean, he's at back-to-back 7 target games, right? Which is all right, which is fine. And you look, that's actually one of my favorite games, is the Detroit-Minnesota game. I mean, Minnesota's projected at 29.75 points, which is, I think, the highest on the slate. And so I think that Detroit's going to be passing the ball a lot, and Amon-Ra's going to get a lot of it. But I think TJ Hawkinson at 4.2K is kind of ridiculous for a tight end spot that is really just, you kind of go dumpster diving at that place unless you're going Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce, right? And for the next guy that I was thinking of is, you kind of took it from me. I was going to go Irv Smith as well. And once again, from that Minnesota game. So for me, I think those two tight ends, you can stack either. If you're going to go Jared Goff stack, Kirk Cousins stack, which is something that I'm going to do. I'm either going to go Cousins or Goff. Those are someone that is low priced, because when you're going Cousins, you kind of want to go Jefferson. When you're going Goff, you kind of want to go Amon-Ra. And so both of those guys, either as a bring back or to stack their quarterback, are both pretty darn cheap. So those are the two guys that I really like. And Tyler Higbee, like you said, Sam, I think he's becoming a massive target for Matthew Stafford, right behind Cooper Kupp. Like, Cooper Kupp's going to get his, but for a tight end, I think Tyler Higbee is really solid. And I'm with you, Jake, that I'm not going to pay up for a Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce. That's just not something I want to do this week. I think I'm going to pay up at running back. And for me, those are the TJ Hawkinson, I think, is one of my favorite plays, honestly. It's just on the slate is one of my favorite plays and one of the plays that I'm going to get in my lineup a lot. So for me, TJ Hawkinson is the main guy, then Irv Smith and Tyler Higbee. Those are my three main targets.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm only going high because of the Derek Carr stack. I'm not really a big fan of the other high-end tight ends. Another guy, Hayden Hurst, at 3,900 could be a very solid price. He's been targeted 15 times in 2 games. So, yeah, there's a lot of low-end tight ends. I think you could probably go. I bet that's where a lot of people are going this week, just looking at it and looking at the other running backs and receivers. So I'm going a bit high, sticking to the stack. But yeah, now defense, and this is what I said. I might have to change this all up. And it depends on, is Justin Herbert going to play this week? Because if he does not, the Jaguars defense at 2,300 could be a very solid price. The Chargers offense is going to be slowed down a lot. Herbert's questionable with that rib injury. I kind of want to go low on defense. I could go Raiders for a bit more at 2,500, but sorry, some car just honked behind me. But I didn't have the money for that. I spent it all up. I'm trying to keep this as low as possible. And I think the Jaguars defense, if Justin Herbert does not play, if he does play, I'm going the Raiders at 2,500 against the Titans. I'm not really the biggest fan of the Titans offense so far this year. I think that's a really good price, an asking price for the Raiders defense. So those two are the defenses that I would go with, depending on injury.
Yeah, I have 3 written down, and I didn't realize that Herbert's status was actually up in the air. I think
he's being reevaluated tomorrow, I believe.
Yeah,
so he is definitely up in the air.
They said cartilage in his rib cage.
To
me that
fracture.
Screams what?
Rib cartilage fracture, which I have no idea what the heck that is.
To me, that screams flak jacket game, which unless you're Cam Newton, it really doesn't affect you all that much. But yeah, again, if he's out, obviously that's somewhat solid. I have 3 plays. None of them are super high priced, but the highest I'm going Bucks at 3.1. I think that game's going to be a slog. And to be honest, outside of Fournette, I don't really want a ton of that. And I think Rodgers stands in the pocket. He could get sacked a lot. I know he doesn't throw a lot of picks, so you're losing out on that, I guess, upside. But I like that. And then 2.8, I got the Titans. I played a lot of Cardinals that were super underpriced last week just because it was the Raiders, and I knew they were going to fuck up somehow. And they did in the end. And the Cardinals got played at 0.5% ownership, and 9 points looked really solid. And then down low, Lions 2.2. I think Aiden Hutchinson had 3 or 4 sacks. by himself. No, that didn't happen.
I'm not a fan of the Lions. I think this Viking. The thing with the Lions defense is they just haven't. I feel like they haven't done that much. I know last game was pretty good, but I think this Vikings offense is a lot better than this Lions defense, and I think you can pay up for a few $100s more to get a better defense, a significantly better defense, I should say.
What I say about defenses is I really don't care at all. Like, I just assume they're going to get the points. I assume they're going to get the yardage. I'm just looking for is there an opportunity that the Lions get 5 sacks randomly on Kirk Cousins, or like a few balls get tipped up in the air and at 2.2 they get 10 points? Absolutely.
That's the thing with keep on going.
Yeah, if I only have 2K, I'm not going to sacrifice somewhere else. It's such a shit show at the defense. Like, I'm just going to take it. And if they get 0 like week 1, I'll eat it. But like, it's the difference between a great defense and an awful defense is like 10 points. So,
and the thing is with defense, it's such a crapshoot. So last week was Cincinnati. The week before that, it was Commanders, and they both busted considering their ownership in GPPs. Because I think what people don't understand, how defense scores points is not by not giving up yards and not giving up points. They score by fluke touchdowns, right? Like Atlanta. Who would have thought Atlanta would put up that many fantasy points? And why? Because a bunch of flukes, right? What a strip sack fumble for a touchdown, a blocked kick goes for a touchdown. That's how defenses score points. That's because, and I don't like the stack of the running back defense stack because, the running backs, and they're going to be up, so they're going to run the ball a lot because their defense did really well. Well, I think the prudent thing to do is just go with what fits, and that's what I do. Like, talking about you, Jake, is if it just fits, I'm not going to sacrifice somewhere else so I can go up 300 and maybe, there's a spot I play I really like, not to go down now because I want to sell a defense. Your defense can give up 28 points, 30 points, and still put up 9 or 10 fantasy points because some fluke thing happened. They got a few sacks, a pick six, whatever it is. And so for me, I want to go against, if I'm looking at defense, I want an offense that passes the ball a lot. So I wouldn't want to grind it out kind of offense because there's not much opportunity there. And so for me, it's a crapshoot, but if I am going to be a little more selective, I want to go against teams that throw the ball, not just like Tennessee, grind it out a lot because they're not dropping back. They're not passing the ball. You're not going to get strip sacks, picks, whatever it is, right? Because if you're just handing the ball off 30, 35 times, the clock is going to run. It's going to be really slow. There's not much opportunity for upside, and that's really what you look for in defense. And so I'm really with you, Jake, just what fits. That's my strategy every week.
Literally, thinking about, especially last week, I just looked it up. Out of the top 7 defenses, 4 of them were a part of games that had over 50-point totals. Those games get so high scoring. Like Ravens, Dolphins. If you had the Ravens defense, your defense cashed in the first 10 seconds because Devin Duvernay returned a kick, and then it didn't matter after that. Tua threw a couple picks, and that's great. Yeah. And so I just, again, not to be. We saw it last week. The chalk was the Bengals, and they weren't good. It didn't end up mattering. You can talk about the Jaguars being a good play, but at the end of the day, the Jaguars are a bad defense, and the Chargers could run the ball down their throat, never turn the ball over, and still put up 25 points. I don't see a whole lot of upside there. And so, the Bengals defense last week was 41% owned. And they put
oh my goodness.
I X'd them out and everything. I didn't put Bengals defense in a single lineup.
Smart man to that, Julian.
Like I said, I put the Cardinals, who I'm now looking, 0.3%, 9 points. It's just such a, they were at 2,400 and the Bengals were at 2,200. The value was not as insane as it was made out to be. And that tends to be the case with more than defense, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess so. Well, that's our individual lineups. Let's really quickly make a consensus lineup to wrap up the show. And guys, I'll start by asking, is there a quarterback, wide receiver / tight end / running back / whatever you want to call it? Is there a stack you want to make for the week? Is there a stack that anyone is set on?
Well, I just, it's interesting because I had my lineup coming in, and I've been like listening to what everyone's saying and making a like different lineup just kind of based on that. And I kind of like the like Julian was talking about, the Lions Vikings with Kirk Cousins, and then if you have Smith and Hawkinson, then you can afford Jettis, or you can afford Amon-Ra if you want to go the Goff route. That's interesting to me, but again, like if you guys want to spend down at quarterback, I'm totally comfortable with that this week.
Yeah, and I think that was where I was going to go with my stack, because that's the stack I'm going to roll out with, the main thing that I'm going to do. And I think for me, Jake touched on that already, so I'll move on from that. But I think going with Marcus Mariota in that game, the Atlanta-Seattle game, and I think pairing Marcus Mariota with Drake London at 5.8K, I mean, I think that's really solid because Mariota's cheap, Drake London isn't super expensive. And then you bring it back with a guy like DK Metcalf, who has really high upside, right? He could go explode for however many points, right? That's something that you want in GPP, that upside, kind of like the Tyreek Hill kind of fast guys that can go off for a 70-yard touchdown. And I think for me, my number one stack is that Detroit-Minnesota game. But an underrated one that I think is going to get overlooked is that Atlanta with Marcus Mariota at 5.5K, right? Pair him with Drake London at 5.8. You can bring it back with a wide receiver. You don't have to. If you want to bring it back with Lockett at 5.8, that's really cheap. And I think that's something that you can get a guy like Justin Jefferson now. And it's not going to ruin your life. That's how you get Justin Jefferson, is playing that low price stack. And so those are the two stacks that I'm targeting, really.
Gotcha. So I'm kind of getting the sense that we go with this, get 4 players banged out of the way right here with Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Irv Smith. Is everyone cool with that?
I don't want to go 2 tight ends in one roster. Do you want to go 2 tight ends in one roster?
I mean, that's what Jake suggested, but we can switch it if we need to.
It's just where the upside in our flex spot. Where's the upside with Irv Smith and if we're gonna run Irv Smith and TJ Hawkinson?
Well, how about we keep one of those tight ends and keep it going and figure that out if we have enough money. Like if we want the money, we can do that.
I think we just need, if we're gonna do Kirk Cousins, I think we just do Cousins, Jefferson, Hawkinson. That's my thoughts on it. Just pair him with Jefferson, hope he just goes nuclear, and then Hawkinson is a really good value. And so for me,
I like that as a starting build. Why don't we take Irv Smith out for now, and what running backs do we look like? The only reason I think that Irv Smith is going to end up in our lineup, I know you might not like the 2 tight ends, but he is just so cheap. And having gone up Jefferson and having Cousins at almost 7K, if we want any kind of running backs, it's going to be really hard.
I agree.
Yeah,
and I think
can we just go Jared Goff? Can we just go Goff with Amon-Ra, and then we go Irv Smith? That's cheaper.
I'm really set on this Viking stack. I know it's a bit more pricey, but I also think you're going to get more points from it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Cousins is much more likely to have a big week. Like I could see, for example, even if the Lions struggle, I could see Cousins still putting up 30 plus points. But if the Vikings struggle, I don't think Goff puts up 30 points.
I see that as well. For running back, we were talking about that. I think one guy we all talked about is Leonard Fournette. Do we want to add him in the lineup, or do we want to try to save a bit more money here? You guys were talking about go higher.
Let's go Josh Jacobs.
We got 2 running backs.
Jacobs and Fournette.
Yeah.
Jacobs and Fournette. All right, let's do that. Where's Jacobs' price at? 5,400. So 2 guys on the cheaper end for what they're. Well, Fournette's to 6,500, but we think he's going to be pretty cheap this week. Jacobs, a bit of a sleeper, 5,400. I don't think he'll be that high owned, so I'm cool with that. Let's fill out. You guys seem pretty set on a cheap defense. I kind of just want to get that out of the way really quickly so we can manage our money a bit more.
Just go with whatever fits at the end. Just fill out the lineup and what fits in defense. I mean, you can put a defense down now if you want. We can put a defense down.
I mean, I was just thinking like a placeholder, if that makes sense. Because I don't want to. I don't want to get back to like we have $2, like we have $200 left or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. Either way, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, we'll put this in as a quick little placeholder for the Lions. What other wide receivers are you guys thinking? I know I mentioned. I wouldn't go. Who did I have? I wouldn't go Adams.
I like in this lineup. I like Isaiah McKenzie just because of the upside that he brings in what could be another high scoring game. But I mean, again, you guys brought up some other low price guys.
I think Brandon Cooks is really just someone that I really want my lineup, and I think he's going to be in almost all my lineups because I think that's just a value right there.
Yeah, I can get behind a Brandon Cook selection right here. 5,800, a solid price. I think he's a bit more certain to do well than Allen Robinson, Jake. So I would go Brandon Cooks here, if everyone's cool with that.
Yeah, no, I had Allen Robinson in the game. I had my main lineup is a game stack with the Cardinals. And the Rams,
okay.
So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're gonna have to save a bit of money. Only 49, only 5K left in for average price. So I think we got to go really low end. I would go. I'm still hooked on the idea that Aguilar could really work out. The other thing we could do is we could go.
Greg Dortch. That could be a play.
Yeah, I was about to say Greg Dortch.
I don't know.
Maybe if
Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch is really tough for me with Chris Olave only being 200 more. I think there's a big difference in those players. And Greg Dortch, I think you would be really lucky to get what you got in either of the other 2 weeks. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think with Dortch or Olave, I'm 100% fine with either one. I think they're both really good plays. And honestly, I think they're about even when it comes to value. So if you want to go Olave,
that.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I say we go Olave. So we have, if we go Olave, we have 5,400 left.
Let's go.
Garrett Wilson,
Juju Smith-Schuster at 55 and go down on defense.
Juju Smith-Schuster is $100 more, and we would have to go down on someone.
Go down on defense. Is Lions defense?
This is the lowest defense we're at. Yes.
There's no 2K defense, unfortunately.
I know. So I'm a big fan of Garrett Wilson right here. I think that could really work out. I mean, how many targets he got? 14 targets last week, 8 week 1. I think Garrett Wilson. I know it says Cincinnati's good defense,
but I mean, wait, can we just stop for a second?
Yes.
We can't have the Lions defense be our defense. You realize that, right? Because we're playing Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson.
That is true, actually. Yeah, so we would have to go Colts or Dolphins if that was the case. Do we bump it up a little bit?
I'm fine with either. Go with Miami.
Or maybe we do this. How about we drop down? How about this? How about we drop Olave, replace with Dortch? Then we go Raiders D and see what we're at. I just want to see.
No, if we're gonna go
Raiders D is disgusting.
Why don't we just go like Commanders
defense though?
2,300.
Oh, I'm not a big fan of that. I think the Eagles' offense could do very well against them.
Well, I'm not saying they won't because they probably will because it's one of the lowest defenses on the slate. So, I mean, Jaguars, they're probably going to do well, but defense is such a crapshoot. I mean, I don't want to sacrifice, a few $100s just so we can get a higher price defense that's probably going to do better, but who knows?
If we stick again, like I keep saying him because he's the only other low price guy I have written down. But if we stick Isaiah McKenzie in the flex, then we would have price to go up on defense. Or if we go Irv Smith, then we could go Juju and a different defense.
Sure, we can put Irv Smith in.
Yeah, so Irv Smith and then Juju over Olave, I'm thinking. Is that what you guys are thinking? Awesome. We could go even like a really high-end guy.
Well, no, but we need a defense.
To switch. True. So what defense are you guys thinking?
Well, what wide receiver do we want? And then what defense fit?
So we can go.
If you stick Juju in, I think you'd have enough for the Bucks, but that's just my preference on defense.
The Bucks.
Yeah, defense you can go. You would have enough for the Bucks, and we can probably get even something higher than Juju. So that puts us at 400 left. If I don't hate
the Bills either, honestly.
Oh, I'm not a bit. I think Bucks is a bit more safe, in my opinion.
Yeah, but who cares? It's defense. I think you're spending like.
Okay, but my thing is, I think
defense because it's who knows.
I mean, I guess it is a crapshoot, but at the same time, you got to have some security.
Why?
Because you're not gonna profit off of anything.
No such thing as, unless you're gonna go really high up, which I mean, if you want to do that, we can. But security is something you want as like a running back or wide receiver. Defense, you want upside. Like what could happen with the? I mean, it's just
at this point, it's fine. I think stick Juju in there. I'm good with this lineup.
We have 400 left.
I mean,
is there a receiver at maybe 6,200 that you guys want? We replace Cooks with.
I mean, if there's one pivot to be made, I would go Jacobs to Montgomery and then switch the defense. But then we're just so chalky. I just don't.
Yeah, I don't want to be too chalky. I kind of agree with that. I think I'm cool with this lineup right here. I know it's 400, but I mean, what other defenses could you get for 3,500? You could get only the Bill. You get the Bill. Ooh, Saints defense actually could be solid.
That's fine. Sam, you seem really invested in the defense, so pick the defense.
Let's just go that. You can't leave $400 on a table on a main slate. That's just too much value. We can do that if it's like a showdown, but
yeah. All right, we'll go Saints defense then because I feel I
find that I'm okay leaving up to $500. If there's a lineup I really like and there's like literally no and if I would have to completely change the lineup, I'm okay with that.
But really, that's $500 is a lot of salary to leave on the table.
Yeah, it's 1%.
Yeah,
still a lot.
If you're $500 over the course of 100 lineups, 1,000 lineups, 1,000,000 lineups. I mean, this is the thing with leaving money. If it's a main slate, like a 12-game slate, I really don't like leaving that much money. But if it's like showdown, I'll leave like 1,000, 900 on table in GPPs just to get different. But you can get different here without missing out on value if you use all your money. So I think I'm fine with this lineup, but
yeah, I'm good with that.
I'm cool with it too. So to recap, the consensus lineup right here, you got Kirk Cousins, Jefferson, Irv Smith in a stack right there. Other than that, Fournette and Jacobs at running back, Cooks, Schuster at wide receiver, a second tight end, TJ Hawkinson, finishing with the Saints D. All your money is cleared right there. Solid consensus lineup. I think this week is going to be very interesting. Personally, we took very different approaches, everyone, and I think I'm really interested to see how we all do this week. It's going to be, I think the results are going to be a lot different, and we're not going to be that similar.
I'm excited.
Yeah, same.
Me too. Absolutely. Well, that is going to conclude week 3 of the DFS Dudes. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at the DFS Dudes. Jay created an Instagram account for us.
Yeah, I will be uploading all of our individual lineups as well as the consensus this week. So look for that.
Absolutely. Make sure to follow that. But we'll be back week 4, breaking down week 3, talking about week 4. But that's all for this week. Thank you all so much for joining. And Jake, cue the outro.
There are many things a man can do with his time, and this is better than those things. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.